T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
I am the tiger, dancing through the fire. 'Cause I am the champion, and you're gonna hear me roar.
Good evening. This is Steve Bryant, your host tonight on High Performance Leadership with Stephen Bryant. It's a beautiful evening here in Fort McMurray, Alberta. And just a couple things I wanted to talk about before we get to our guests, the beautiful and very intelligent Melody Garcia. One of the things that I really have tried to strive for, and in my years of experience, is connecting with people. I think one of the greatest things that I've learned in connecting with people is listening to their stories. A lot of them maybe just having been able to tell their story for the first time. And when you build that connection, some great things happen. And I've seen it happen so many times. I'm a firm believer in the importance of connecting with people. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, my friend, great friend, Sarah Shakespeare, the one who really got me onto this Coach on Fire, she actually interviewed me back, I believe it was in February, and had just had a great time, and was heard by somebody who was very influential, and said, "Would you like a spot on Coach on Fire?" And I had jumped at the chance, and I am so glad that I made that decision, because I have been connected even with some great people, and our guest tonight, Melody Garcia, is one of them. I wanted to talk a little bit about Melody tonight. Melody is an award-winning writer, speaker, and thought leader, and an international bestseller author of the book titled Women Who Influence, which also landed in the U.S. Library of Congress. Melody is a transformational catalyst coach, consultant, media persona with her own TV pilot show, writes for an international magazine, and also leads the 14th Congressional UNICEF advocacy team in the U.S., which she founded. On top of this, Melody is a single mom, and a miracle movement she created called One Night, One Voice, aided over 20,000 lives, and now represents 190 country advocacy via UNICEF and more. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Melody a couple of times, and just an amazing lady who's got a lot on the go, has got a real heart for people, and having people be at their full potential, and some great conversations. We're going to have a great conversation, and I know it. I'm excited about this show, and Melody has a lot to share, so I won't take a lot of time talking about myself. We'll get into the show with Melody. Melody, it is great to have you here on Coach on Fire. Welcome tonight.
Well, thank you so much, and big hugs and love coming from sunny Florida. It is, evening. We have had another crazy hot weather. But I believe that Florida is a home of loving people, so that's why it's extra hot, as we call it.
Well, I love it, because you were near Orlando. Or are you still near Orlando?
I am still near Orlando, but that's exclusive information to Canada. People are trying to figure out where I live at this point.
Well, I tell you, Orlando has a special place in my life. Two reasons. One is I received my certification with John Maxwell at a conference, a certification event in Orlando back a couple of years ago. And it's near where my brother lives. My brother is a U.S. Air Force retired military, and he actually ended up homeless on the streets a couple of years ago. And just learning a lot about my brother, not knowing some things, suffering with some PTSD, and being able to, through family members, through the VA, able to help him get back on track, and living in Inverness, Florida now. So I love Florida, and being able to be with some people I really care about.
Well, you know what that means, right? That our paths will cross sooner than you think, since you have family right here in the city.
Absolutely. Well, definitely. And so hopefully we're planning a trip near the end of the year to be there. So I'll definitely be connecting with you.
Yes.
So Melody, before we get into some of the things that you wanted to talk about, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know a little bit about you, but I wanted the audience that's listening tonight to get to know you a little bit better.
Well, to all the listeners, first of all, it's an honor to be part of this show with Stephen. You know, I connect with authentic souls. So Stephen is one of those that was just a blessing to come across my path, invited me to be part of the show so I can deliver some of the, key messages that led me to where I am today. So as you have mentioned earlier, I wear many hats. First of all, as a mom that's already busy. A single mom is double busy. But then you add global advocacy for children and leading a team in representing 190 countries. That's one. And a contributing writer for an international magazine that talks about life journey stories of breakdown to breakthroughs. And I've been blessed to interview some of the global influencers that are out there. Then that jumps into a pilot show called Melody in Motion with Manila Up TV that basically carries the same article connotations, but this time putting it in the TV screen that's broadcasted all over Asia and the nation. And then, of course, as a Transformational Catalyst Coach and a speaker, it's definitely a not boring life, as I would say it.
I can imagine.
It is certainly an on-the-go of making sure I stay on top of everything. But it all culminates down to one thing, which we're going to talk about, which is purpose over position.
That's interesting. Very good. So we were discussing a little bit about, of course, we're both people of faith. And when we talk about the mustard seed, we're both very familiar with that, with that concept. So one of the things that I'd like to have you describe this evening is how to activate that mustard seed. So tell me a little bit about that and how you've been able to do it, and what have been some of the results from that.
Okay, so some background information. I'm going to take you back to 1986, and I was a child at that point. Just to give you background on just the brevity and the impact of what had taken place since activating that mustard seed. So I was born in the Philippines. From a comfortable life. My father was a well-known doctor and a surgeon and teacher. I mean, you name it. This was, now you know that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because he wasn't just a chief of staff of one hospital. Plus being a doctor, he was a chief of staff for 2 hospitals and a president of Kiwanis Club and just all this. Then comes my mother. My mother was an entrepreneur. At the same time, worked as a corporate executive. And she never really completed even high school, but the blessings that went before her connected her with such big audiences, both humanitarians at heart. In 1986, when you have those moments where you never expect where life takes you, and fortunately it took a turn for us when one of my relatives was kidnapped and then murdered because he came across information that was politically potentially damaging. And next thing we know is that our lives are under severe threat and danger. So guess what my parents had to do? What any parents would do is to save and protect their family. Right. So in the middle of the night, what had happened was maids woke me up, my sister up. We were kids at the time. And basically they were told to pack everything and anything that they could get their hands on. Our papers were already drawn. We've come to the United States as tourists previously, so the country was not too foreign, right, and spoke fluent English, but this was different because we had to disappear in the middle of the night. Never got a chance to say goodbye to family, to friends, nothing. We just had to literally disappear, only to emerge in the United States a week later between my mom, my sister, and myself, now living with relatives in a very small home, and my sister and I, gone were the comforts of home. We were sleeping on the floor, and my mom had the bed, and we practically left everything and had to start life with absolutely nothing. And I remember one of my mom's first jobs, coming from this big responsibilities, corporate responsibilities, entrepreneurship, was now to humble herself to work at a 7-Eleven store making $3 an hour.
Oh, my.
And just so that she can survive raising 2 daughters at that point. You know, we were separated from my father for about a year and a half because of the turmoil that was happening, you know, and the death threats that were so severe. So we had to forget life as it was, but yet grounded us with be grateful for the things that, you know, people often take for granted, and really reshape that journey. I didn't have the typical teenager problems as a boy crushes or whatever it is. It was more of, how did we land in this country and what is the survival all about?
Right.
You know, where we used to be the givers and the donors for people that were in need, we found ourselves completely the opposite of recipients of what church can give us to get our life going. So that was 1986. I grow up, you know, typical. I skip 2 grades. I go to high school. I go to college. I get married. I go on with my life. But in all that, you're given certain gifts along the way and life experiences. So we now fast forward from 1986. I never went back to the Philippines. You know, it was since then. And fast forward 2013. This is now the beginning of the activation of the mustard seed. And for those who may not be familiar, there's a Bible verse that says, if you had faith as small as a mustard seed, it will move mountains.
Absolutely.
So this is now the beginning of that story. In the end of 2013, the Philippines was hit with the biggest typhoon or hurricane, as we know it here, called Typhoon Haiyan. And this makes global news because of the amount of devastation, the loss of life, and it looks like a nuclear bomb just went off in certain parts of the country that was badly devastated. And, you know, at the end of the day, you can attest to this, home is still home. Doesn't matter how long you've been away. Even if when I left as a kid, there was something calling me during that moment. And with the global media coverage on this, there was a voice that was prompting me to look at not mainstream media, but to go on internet news, look at a story or look for a story relating to the storm. And I followed that instinct. You know, now I can call it by its name, called discernment. At that time, I'm like, okay, let me figure out why I'm supposed to go to internet news. Well, at that time, the Philippines did not censor any news information. They would show everything, right? And I came across a story of this woman that literally was holding 2 of her dead children that could not have been more than age 5 or 6. They're little. And in her story, you know, the background looked like, as I said, just debris everywhere. She didn't know where her husband was taken by the storm. She had no idea where her home was even at this point. All she knew is for 3 days, she could not even bury her own kids because of the amount of debris. But it was beyond just that. It was seeing the pain that was so evident in her, the emptiness, the question of how in the world did she survive this, and why did she survive it to begin with? Why was not, you know, and because I believe that the deepest pain stems from the loss of your own child.
Sure.
And in seeing this, completely broke me down. I mean, this is ugly, crying like you've never seen, of just intense sobbing, because for that window, I felt her pain. And all I remember doing, Stephen, was honestly getting down on my knees in tears, complete tears, for this woman I don't know, from a country I've left since when I was a kid.
Right.
And the only words that came out of me was, help me help them, and activate all the gifts you have given me to help me reach them.
Wow. That's quite a step of faith.
And that was coming from the heart space in complete tears, complete brokenness for what was happening. And that's all I said. Again, is help me help them and activate all the gifts you've given me to help me reach them. Because I recognized early on that I just didn't have one talent. When it came to the creative space, it was from singing, writing, speaking, acting. I mean, the performing arts world was a cornerstone. And then there was the analytical space, and there was this marketing space. So everything, all of this, I didn't even realize the activation of that mustard seed at that given point.
So, Melody, tell me, After you prayed, what was the first step that was taken? Was it something that just came to you, or did you actively pursue